Morning in Manchester. Coffee. And thank you so much for joining. Buongiorno, Max, Johan, good morning, friend, good morning, and Henrik. Good morning to you. You've got an easy lips to stand by. Very nice. The bow, no, yeah, right lips. Bow, right lips, orange chocolate. Anyway, some really interesting stuff. Yeah, really awesome. It may sound strange. The audience, oh, okay. Is it working correctly now? I can see that. It should be only in some microphone. Let me just check that. 1 second. Now, is that better? Is that better? Let me know. I think Gregor got the right idea. It's really hard. So this is a default microphone. But I just switched it to the HP4 left-hand C920. So you can see no changes. I've made it. No changes. Still no changes. Wait, center line. Center line. Yes. Okay, wait a minute. Now, here we go. So not quite, not really. Not yet. I don't think I've sent that change to live. So this should be okay now. Oh my goodness me. It's probably just me not configuring everything correctly. I've just switched. So I'm waiting for you now to let me know. I think it should be okay now. Okay, perfect. Thank you, Max. Yeah, that was completely my fault. I had, for some, I made the big mistake of switching back to my MacBook Pro for this broadcast. Big mistake. MacBook Pro with Catalina. No. And it was so loud. The fan was so loud. 5 minutes ago, I just put the MacBook under the desk on a stand so that the noise of the fan wouldn't disturb the audio. And I think the connection got loose and it defaulted back to the default internal microphone, and I didn't notice. Thank you very much for letting me know. Perfect. Okay. Interestingly enough, the machine I've been broadcasting on and working on recently, I've been changing things around a little bit, is this one. This is my Asus Chromebox 3, which is awesome. It's a very modest i5 with 8 gigs of RAM running Chrome OS, and it outperforms the socks of this MacBook Pro i7 with 16 gig running Mac OS Catalina. Read into that what you will. Anyway. Got my coffee. Yeah, so let's switch to the main scene. And just a couple of things I wanted to cover. Tom, I'll do a brief comment, put out something on LinkedIn. Yes, I send you your activity. Okay. Okay, I've got to change this. That should be okay. Thank you, Max. The microphone is specifically a separate layer in each scene, so I'm going to change that. Oh my goodness me. Okay, there goes the sound again with this. Yes, okay, so it should be back. We should be back. Are we back? Are we back? Are we back? I think we are. So yeah, we've had the sorry everybody. I think we're okay now. I've updated the webcam and I've sent it to live. It should be okay. Just let me know. Morning. Yes, better. Okay. Thank you. Good morning, Andrew. Now it's my fault, Andrew. I got the microphone setting wrong, and I forgot also that the microphone setting is on each scene, not generally. Anyway, okay. How long have I been live streaming? 1.5 years. What a fool. I don't know what I'm doing. Anyway, okay. So yes, so the SAP Community Coding Challenge. The announcement is going to be on 17th of March, which is next week, Tuesday next week. So follow the link on to LinkedIn there and have a quick look. I think that is a little bit of a video update from Tom. So have a look at that. Very excited. And then once we've done that, we're going to introduce another community coding challenge. So watch this space. Robert, you entered the challenge yesterday. You hope you will win the no prize. Well, I guess by default, everybody will win the no prize, but you know, the winner will win the best no prize. I don't know. Who knows? So there we go. So that's that. And what I also wanted to just bring to your attention was that last Sunday, I think, I don't know whether Ronnie's on, but Ronnie did notice. Ronnie noticed he happened to be around at the time. But on Sunday, I sort of did an unprompted live stream, messing around with the Raspberry Pis there, or at least one of the Raspberry Pis in that stack, looking at some instructions from Alex Ellis. So there's the URL, and basically it's a sort of side project, side sort of stream series that I'm thinking of doing. Experiments with Pi-based clusters, with Kubernetes, with Docker, Swarm, controlling them maybe with Ansible as well. I've been doing some learning over the past few weeks, very early learning, but it's really interesting. So, and of course, it's super relevant for us as developers and technicians in the SAP developer space with Cloud Foundry and cloud in general, and Kubernetes and Istio and Gardener. But it's nice to learn this stuff sort of in isolation on hardware that we can play around with, and also it's accessible hardware, so it's very cheap, relatively cheap anyway. So yeah, I was looking at K3s, which is like a cut down but still productive version of Kubernetes. It's like Kubernetes -5, 8 -3, I don't know, with Ketchup and Arcade, two really nice facilities that Alex wrote to make things a lot easier, and also looking at OpenFAS. A really interesting open functions as a service platform and initiative. Anyway, so that's that. Have a look at that. Subscribe if you're not already to the channel, and then you can follow this playlist and everything. Let me know. I was going to say it's in the comments anyway, where the name Bramble Weenie came from. Anyway, okay, so let's start off now, dive straight into, I guess, where we left off last time, which was last week. We had successfully, I think, successfully deployed all the bits and pieces to my Cloud Foundry trial dev space. And let's just go straight into the trial account. And if I look in my trial account here, I don't know whether it's the interwebs are very slow. I think the interweb is fine. It's just that the MacBook is just so sluggish when it's doing anything serious like this. If I look in my dev space, I will see, or we will see, some applications, a couple of applications that we were playing around with. We had this whole, let's look in the web IDE. We had this entire, let's get rid of this order flow thing. I'll explain what that is in a second. Entire sample workflow tiles MTA trial, and if we looked in the, this is what we deployed. If we look in the MTA YAML, which is here, we will see that we've got this workflow tiles app router and the workflow tiles Fiori Launchpad, both of which rely upon a number of resources, the runtime repo, an HTML5 repo runtime, a portal service, user authorization and authentication service, and also, of course, the workflow service, which was a service we created manually in the cockpit directly, which is the reason why we specified existing service as the type rather than managed service. So we've got all that set up now. We're not going to go through that again. And the result of setting that up is that we have in the applications area of this dev space, we've got this workflow tiles app router and the workflow tiles FLP application, which is in the correct stop state because that was a task, a Cloud Foundry task that deployed content to the Fiori Launchpad, and that content was the common data model that we discussed last time, and also that Gregor mentioned as well in the conversation. That's been deployed to the portal service that I've got an instance now of, and that content also define the tiles that should appear. So we'll go to the tiles right now by going to the app router that we've also deployed, which is running, which will direct us to the welcome page. I think if we have a look in here, in the workflow tiles app router, we can see that the XS app, the configuration for the app router basically says send them to /cp.portal. Okay, so when I select the route that's provided by this application router app, I'll open up a new window or a new tab rather, and we'll use the authentication flow, and that's something that will feature quite a lot in hopefully this live stream. We'll click on that, and we'll get redirected to cp.portal, and that will redirect us with a 302 to site. And eventually we should see the Fiori Launchpad with our 3 tiles, which we saw last time. Great, okay. Gregor says, how much memory do you have in the MacBook? I noticed that 16 gig that I have in my current replacement MacBook aren't enough. Need the 32 gig. Yeah, I mean, I've got 16 gig in this. It's an i7 dual core, whatever it is, i7 with 16 gig, which is far bigger than any other of the machines I have on my network here at home, and it's by far the worst performing machine. So yeah, I don't know. Not that I'm annoyed or anything at all. Well, I'm not annoyed at all. Chrome OS is the future for me. So there we go. So we got that, and we also, I mean, I've been building out or rewriting the code jam content for the workflow code jam, which is not just workflow, it's sort of cloud platform, so it involves running a cloud connector inside a Docker container. It involves the API hub, it involves using Postman, it involves using the ES5 backend system as a sort of pretend on-premise system. Bye, Freddie. Have a good day at school. Bye. Thanks for saying bye as well, Robert. That's awesome. So yeah, I'm rewriting that, and in the process of rewriting that, I've also created this sort of order flow workflow. But that's what I want to do today with you for the first part of this. But the more interesting part, we want to create a workflow, a really simple workflow, deploy it. But then I thought, oh, let me see if I could call it from the API hub. Okay, and this is something that Max and I have been talking about when Max was doing something last week, and it's super interesting that what I've not discovered. I mean, it's there if you read the documentation, but the documentation is a little bit terse and my brain's a little bit small. But I've had a bit of a bit of a revelation that I wanted to share. Okay, so let's do that. So what we'll do is we'll create a workflow definition and we'll deploy it, and then we'll have a look at it and we'll run one using the tiles. We'll create an instance of the workflow definition, and yeah, fine, great. And then we'll try and list that instance and maybe list that definition through the API hub and see what happens. Okay, bearing in mind bearing in mind that when we've looked at the workflow service before on Neo, on the SAP Cloud Platform, when we use the API hub to call the workflow APIs, we use basic authentication. And the basic authentication, of course, revolved around our user ID, as in representing me, DJ, and the relevant password. And there was also some CSRF jiggery-pokery that we had to do as well, which is understandable. Here on Cloud Foundry, everything is OAuth, okay, which I'm sure you're aware of right now. But the subtleties between me as a user and maybe a service application that I want to give access to and I want to make API calls on my behalf, that's all handled by OAuth in different ways. Okay, so yeah, this is going to be a journey of sort of discovery of that. Anyway, let's start with, does that all make sense, by the way? Let me know. Let's start with a workflow definition. And also, when we create a workflow definition in the Web IDE, it's fairly straightforward, and then deploying it to Neo is just right-click and deploy to SAP Cloud Platform. Here it's a little bit more involved because, of course, we're in Cloud Foundry and everything is a multi-target application. So in order to create a workflow definition and deploy it, we'll create a new project from templates. That template is basically going to be a multi-target application, okay? That one there. So everything is a multi-target. The answer is multi-target application. Now, what's the question? That sort of thing. So why don't we call it episode 57, because I can't think of names. Let's call the application, the MTA details, episode 57 as well. That'll do. That's fine. Keep all the defaults. And what we end up with, let me just close everything here. What we end up with is a very empty project, based on this template. And if we have a look in the MTA YAML, there's nothing in there. Okay, this is a really basic multi-target application project with no modules, no resources, no nothing. So now what we do is we'll say within here, use the context menu and say new workflow module, keyword module here, right? Oh, Gregor. As soon as the memory pressure is high, it's lagging like hell. But now again, pleased by the supporters, my battery and keyboard is replaced with zero cost for me. Interesting. Yes, my keyboard on my MacBook Pro is one of those butterfly ones. Terrible, unusable, more or less. Anyway, yes, let's. I'm going to stop bashing Apple and my MacBook because I should be grateful, shouldn't I? Really. Module name. So we're going to create this. Let's call this test workflow. Well, why don't we call it simple workflow? Simple workflow. There we go. Right. We're going to call the workflow simple workflow as well. Okay. It doesn't really matter what it's called. That's fine. A new module named simple workflow will be created in your workspace. Fine. What that will do is it will add some entries to the MTA YAML. Let's have a look. There's a simple workflow. We're not going to change that. We're not going to add anything into this workflow definition right now. It just starts and then it ends. Okay, but that's enough for us to start playing with. Hey, good morning, Ronnie. You fine person yourself too. What's your update on the SAP online track? That's awesome. Ronnie, if you can share that video update URL on the chat, that'd be awesome. So people can watch it. It was very good. So now if we look at the MTA YAML, we can see that initially we had those 3 lines there because it was basically an empty MTA definition file. But now we've got this single module, and the module is called simple workflow to reflect this thing here, this sort of subdirectory. And we've seen this type of module before. If we have a look at the sample workflow tiles MTA trial, if we have a look in there, well, it's a similar type. There is basically a com.sap.portal.content. Okay, so this is this caused that task to kick in and deploy the stuff from here into the portal service. And in the same way, we've got this com.sap.application.content, which is this generic content loading mechanism, right? It will load the stuff that's in the simple workflow path, which is in, let's just close that again, which is in here, okay? and it will load it into this workflow episode 57, which points to this resource, which of course is not what we want. I mean, how can it work out that we've already got a workflow? Well, I suppose it could theoretically, but which one if we've got multiple ones? So anyway, let's not even go there. So it requires a workflow service instance. Okay, it's in the same way that our deployment of the other one required the workflow service instance. So let's just modify this very quickly to say it requires this thing called workflow, which is this one here, and it's an existing service. I don't think we need, do we? Theoretically, we don't need. Let's have a look at this one. Service plan. Yeah, I mean, type existing service. Why would you have parameters for a service plan and a service if it was an existing service? So why don't we try that as well? I've literally never tried that. So that's what we want. We want the fact that it's an existing service, because there is, where's our service? Let's go into dev, service instances. There it is, workflow. Name is workflow. It's a service, workflow service instance, and it's a light one, and these two things are bound to it already, etc. So that's the one we want. In fact, I'll click into that. We'll look at that in a minute. Yes, so that's that. So theoretically, let's just save that, and well, let's deploy it as it is first of all, and see if that works, and then we'll remove these and deploy it as well. Okay, so that's all we need. But let's just, before we do that, let's have a look what's inside this simple workflow folder. We've got the forms, we've got the sample data, we've got the scripts, we've got the web content, all the stuff we've seen before when we've been playing around with the workflow service on Neo is exactly the same. And we've also got the workflows folder with this single simple workflow definition, which is this thing here, right? Okay, there we go. And there is, if we have a look at the, I think we can have a look in the code editor, and we've had a brief look at something like this before, but basically, let's not worry ourselves about that. So all we need to do now is, because it's an MTA, everything is an MTA, let's build it. Okay, so build should be fairly fast, because it's literally building this content, and that's it. There's no sort of node modules to download and install and everything. See, it's finished already. Okay, and now it's created this MTA archives directory. We know the score now. We know we're expecting this, and I'm going to right click on here and say deploy to SCP platform. Right, let's see what happens. Okay, we need to specify the endpoint. So let's go for, where is it? EU10. And in the, we've got to authenticate as well. That's amazing. What is it? So we're authenticating with the Cloud Foundry endpoint. That's not the organization I want. It's this one. And that only has a single space, which is dev, which is therefore automatically selected for me. And now it's going to deploy. So let's have a look at, well, actually, it should only take a second, really, because there's nothing much to do here. Is there anything happening on here? Let's go. I wanted to see, monitor it. Deploying to endpoint. Okay, that's fine. Okay, so let's go back to the dev space here. Yeah, can't really see much going on. Applications, nothing happening there either. Let's have a look. Deploy. Come on. Country, all fine here, thank you. Country is in lockdown with closed schools and kindergartens, so doing our best to work from home here, entertaining the kids at the same time. Amazing. Oh, by the way, talking of working from home, Ronnie, your monitor that was in front of you on your SAP online track update was huge. Very impressive. There we go. So the episode 57 project has been deployed. Okay, creating service key, simple workflow credentials. So service keys, okay, come into this quite interestingly a bit later on. We may have to move over to the next episode as well to continue this. But there we go. Let's have a look now in the workflow definitions. As you've seen already, as I mentioned, I've been doing this order flow for the CodeJam content. I didn't want to delete that, let's just leave that there. So we should see at least the order flow definition and hopefully this episode 57 definition as well. There we go. Yes, we got the order flow definition, or the order flow module, which has an order process. Let's just show you that there. The order flow module has this order process workflow definition. So order process lowercase is the ID of the workflow, and we got this simple workflow with the ID simple workflow inside of episode 57, which is why we've got order process and also simple workflow. Amazing. Okay, so there are no instances of this simple workflow right now. Okay, we've deployed that. Well, let's just see if it works, right? Start new instance of this simple workflow. Let's take the lovely bookshop sample data. I don't know whether it's coincidence that the bookshop sample in the cat world, there's a bookshop there, and also this is book data as well. I'm always wondering about that. Anyway, workflow instance started. Let's have a look at instances, and we can see that it's not there because it's finished already, hasn't it? Let's just broaden the status filter, and we should see, hopefully, there we go. Simple workflow completed. Started 8:25. Is it 8:25 already? Oh my goodness. Completed at 8:25 as well. There we go. And there is the context. Great. Okay. So far, so good. Now, rather than mess around with extending that workflow definition with service tasks and user tasks for now, what I would like to do is have some coffee and use the API hub to list those workflow definitions. Let's this thing, right? And what I think we will see is something that I stumbled over, and I know Max, you stumbled over this as well, right? Which sort of took me by surprise, but then it ended up taking me by surprise in a very pleasant way. I'm just going to put the blinds down because the sunshine is lovely, but I can't see anything. There we go. So let's go. I think I might have it. There we go. I'm going to go direct to, I'll put this, let me share this in the chat as well, or log on while I'm waiting. Come on, paste in, get in there. Okay, so the workflow API for Cloud Foundry. Now there are two APIs for workflow. There's the sort of the task collection management API, which is an OData API. And then there's the more general workflow API, which is non-OData, sort of more generic REST based for manipulating workflow related things like definitions, like tasks, like forms, and so on. Not only definitions, workflow definitions, task definitions, and so on, but also instances. So instances of, that you've kicked off of workflow definitions and instances of tasks, right? So this is a little bit different to the way that the business rules API landscape is defined, because the business rules API landscape, remember, has a runtime API and a design time API, a repository API, design time API, and a runtime API. So bear that in mind. First of all, so there are still two APIs, but this one API is where it's at as far as we're concerned right now. Now, I have logged on and I've already defined an environment. Well, let's do another one. Okay, let's do another one. Let's go to configure environments, and let's create a new environment. And we're going to basically specify that our environment is EU10 based. Where is it? AP, JP, EU. Okay. No, I've got to delete this one first. There we go. EU10, delete that one. Configure environments. What? Delete? Yes, I want to proceed. Okay, and go to configure environments. Oh, there's a bug. Okay, we'll have to change this one then. Okay, let's just change this. Let's go through this again. If we have a look at our service instances, we need to take the information, and we've done this before, so we won't dwell on it too much. We need to take this information from the service keys relating to our service instance, relating to the workflow service instance of the workflow service. Now, notice, this is super interesting as well. Notice that, and we also saw it in the output of our deployment, didn't we? Where was it? Creating new service keys, simple workflow credentials for service workflow. Okay. I deployed this order flow before as well. So that's that order process workflow, and now we've got this simple workflow credentials. So we've got already the concept of a workflow service, for example, and we've got a concept of an instance of that workflow service, and we've got and you can have multiple instances of the same service, and related to an instance of that service, you can have multiple service keys. Okay. And this sort of starts to make sense when you think about how you want to divide up authorizations for maybe different clients, different applications, different contexts, and so on. So, Ronnie, you pointed, it's a Dell Ultra Sharp 38 curve monitor, U30 38-inch. Whoa, amazing. And of course, Vortex Race 3 mechanical keyboard, as I've got here as well. So anyway, let's take the information from the simple workflow credentials and update our endpoints here. So first of all, let's go here and take the client ID, which is this thing here. Let's paste that in. And also what we need is the secret, okay, which is down here. You'll notice, or you'll remember as well, get rid of that first of all and paste that in. And our consumer subdomain, this has changed slightly from what we've been used to, but the consumer subdomain is effectively this thing here, right? Let me explain as well. Oh, it's already there, right? Consumer subdomain. Now, what we specified is the starting URL for the REST, or the plain REST workflow API. If we have a look here in the service keys, we'll see there's two endpoints, these two API types, the OData API and this REST API. You know, OData is REST as well, right? But let's call it OData. So the endpoint is this API workflow SAP CF app workflow service REST. Okay, so that's the endpoint that we want to call to make our API calls, or the, the root of that call. So that's what we have as the starting URL. Okay, and the resulting URL is basically the starting URL with slash, and again you can't really see this, with slash workflow service REST on the end. So that's like the root path of all the different calls. Okay, when we have a look at the API, you'll see that you go, slash v1 workflow definitions and so on. And we're authenticating not with basic authentication, but with OAuth 2 authentication. And there are different authentication flows which we've looked at before as well. Let me know in the comments, please, right now, because I personally think that now is the time to embrace OAuth 2 and learn about the different authentication flows and understand the difference between them, and when to use what where, okay, and why something might not work and you're getting a 401 saying, why is it, I've got the authentication, and it's not working. It all is starting to make sense once you dig into this, okay? So let me know if this is something we want to, I would like you to, I'm hoping you're going to say, yes, do some more OAuth, because it's super important for Cloud Foundry and our services. So there's the client ID and there's a secret, and the token URL effectively is a combination of the consumer subdomain. I'm a consumer in this case, which is i34749 on trial, which is my trial account subdomain, and the landscape host. So effectively what we're trying to get to in this token URL is the URL that's specified here. Notice that all the information that we want is in, there's the endpoints up here, but all the information from an OAuth 2 authentication perspective is inside this UAA node of this JSON here. So UOA client ID, UAA client secret, and UOA.URL. Okay, so we've got that. Apply this environment, yes. Say this environment, yes. There we go. Do you want to proceed? Yes, I do want to proceed. Okay, API environments updated successfully. Okay, thank you, Andrew. Yes, master OAuth. Yes, we do need to master OAuth. It's seriously important for us. So now, theoretically, we can say, let's list the workflow definitions. And we're expecting to see, effectively, two records, aren't we? Workflow definitions, because we've got two. We've got that order process one that I've been doing the other day, and we've got a simple workflow definition that we've just deployed. So if we now go to the workflow definitions, the first one here is get, nice, V1 workflow definitions. We're in the API EU10 environment, which we've just updated. Hopefully that update has worked. And let's hit try out. Now, let's go down here. We're not really interested in restricting the output, filtering everything. We just want to see all of them. There's only two anyway, right? So let's hit execute. It shows that while we're waiting, it shows what we might get. But what we're getting right now, is that big enough, by the way? What we're getting right now is an error, 403, right? Response body error message, user does not have sufficient privileges. Now, this confused me initially. Here I am, DJ, with my OAuth credentials and everything, and I've logged on, and I've given myself as well. If I go to my the sub-account level, or the organization level, really, look at the role collections. I've got this, and then we did this a couple of weeks ago, didn't we? There's the workflow role collection. We added all those different roles there, admin, workflow god, whatever. And that is also assigned to me. The workflow collection is assigned to me here. That's me. There, workflow, all good. So why does the user have insufficient, what was the message? Does not have sufficient privileges. Thank you, Manuel. Yes, I do think so too. Right. And we'll get to the bottom of this hopefully today, and then we'll expand as well, because anyway. Stop talking, DJ. Now, one of the challenges is that the word user here is a little bit misleading. Because I'm thinking I don't have sufficient privileges, and we've just seen I have sufficient privileges. But this user is not referring to me. It's referring to the OAuth user. I wouldn't have used the word user in the message, but anyway, sufficient privileges, privileges are not sufficient. That would have been a better message. But anyway, what do I know? Let's scroll up and have a look at something here. A little bit bigger again. Oh, I can sort of make that. There we go. Retrieve all workflow definitions, blah, blah, blah. Roles permitted to execute this operation. Global roles, workflow viewer, workflow admin, workflow developer. We've got those, right? I've got those. So scope, workflow definition get. Now, the first thing to know about OAuth is that there are different authentication flows. And in fact, you know what I did last night? I bought this book a long time ago, never read it because I didn't understand it. Very, very thin. I almost didn't find it because it was that thin. It's from a friend of mine who used to work at Google, Ryan Boyd. Getting started with OAuth 2. So I've been reading this, and everything's starting to make sense, right? So, oh no, OAuth. Oh no, auth. Oh no, auth. Ah, nice, Andrew. See what he did there? It even confused me. Brilliant. Okay, so. Yeah, maybe OAuth stands for oh no auth. I think we'll have to make that a thing. Brilliant. Anyway, so these global roles are clearly not appropriate here, not kicking in here. And that's because what's happening in the background, one of the things I said about the API Business Hub with the environments is that actually it's pretty convenient. These environments here, it's not just, we're not just paying lip service to, oh yeah, put this OAuth thing in. What's happening in the background? when we make a call, having configured an environment with our OAuth client ID and secret and all the token URL and everything, is the following. If I go here and open that in a new tab, here's some documentation. I'm not going to read through this documentation in front of you. However, I'm going to share this link. Stacked paper. It was paper, yes, but look how thin it is. It's amazing. It's beautiful. It's sitting alongside one of my other favorite O'Reilly books, which is X-Window Systems Administration, which is awesome. Anyway, yeah, a book. Who knew? So access, using workflow APIs. Did I paste that? Yes. Using workflow APIs, blah, 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 blah. So access workflow APIs using OAuth 2 authentication, brackets, authorization code grant, or access workflow APIs using OAuth 2 authentication, brackets, client credentials grant. Okay. My opinion is that this error message would make a little bit more sense if it said client does not have sufficient privileges. Because what's happening here is that me, dj.adams@sap.com, I'm not part of the equation that's going on in the authentication flow that's being done for us using this environment and in this context of the API Business Hub. What's happening is that the client credentials grant flow is being exercised. Now, the client credentials grant, I can't even say it, the client credentials grant, it's almost like Creedence Clearwater Revival, it's quite hard to say as well, is an OAuth flow, which is a defined OAuth flow from OAuth 2.0. And what happens is that it's the client ID and the client secret relating to the service key that we've just seen, and the OAuth flow relates that identity back to the service key and has a look to see if that service key has the corresponding scope. Okay. Now, and right now, that scope has just, that key has just been created. Where is it? Where is it? Let's go here and let's have a look at it again. Spaces, dev, service instances, workflow. I mean, we could look at it on the command line, which I've got ready here, but let's just carry on with this. Service keys, because I want to make sure we all sort of understand how all this thing relates to each other in the cockpit. First of all, there's a simple workflow credentials service key, and it's this service key that needs to have the scope, because it's this service key that the client ID and client secret is associating itself with, or that's where it's coming from. And so when the resource owner, which is the workflow service, gets this token and says, okay, yeah, fine, let me have a look, it gets this request, let me have a look to see what credentials you have, what scope you have. Oh, I've got a scope. So what we'll do is we will modify our service key to add this scope workflow definition get, and that is how to do that and why to is also in that document, so in that documentation somewhere, right? So let's now go to what's going on here, to the command line, because the command line is the future, and I'm already pointing to our API here, so I can say CF service keys. Let me have a look at the service keys of the workflow service instance, because I could have done CF services and found that there's a service instance called workflow, but let's just skip that step, and we can see what we saw on the web page, which is basically that there are two service keys. Okay, we've got the order process workflow credentials, and we've got the simple workflow credentials. So now we can say CF service keys. There we go. See, oh, I missed out thing. CF service keys, workflow service, and I want those service keys. Okay, which is also what we saw. Now we can do all sorts of things with that. But what we want to do right now, just to keep things simple, is we'll say CF update service. Not that, sorry. Update service. Let's have a look what we have to do with the update service there. There's the service. Okay, so let's just go here and have a look. There's our service instance. Okay, and we can say CF update service workflow, and then provide a list of authorities. Now that's what is in the documentation, and the authority that we need is this, what's it called again? This workflow definition get. So let's go here, workflow definition get. There we go, close that and close that. That should be okay. I have had a look around to see if it's possible to list the current authorities of a service instance, and I can't figure out how to do that. But anyway, let's cross that bridge when we come to it. So we've now specified an absolute list of authorities that would have clobbered the previous list. This is not adding to whatever authorities are already there. This is like specifying the whole list. So all we're giving ourselves right now, or all we're giving this client ID, this service key, is this particular authority. So now, if we go back here and try that out again, theoretically, the last thing we got was user does not have sufficient privileges. If we run that again, there we go. It works. So we can see there's a simple workflow in the response, and there's the order process record for the workflow definition in response. By the way, it's just for me, the DJ screen laggy. Video and audio is okay. Anybody else seeing a lagginess from my stuff? Could be me. I'm not sure. I can see. Yes. I've just noticed actually. I really do think that it's the MacBook with the screen share and everything. I can just see you've just got now the response body. Okay, I'm going to take it a little bit slower, and I will switch away from this nightmare MacBook Pro Catalina again, back to trusty old Chrome OS. So there we go. Would have been nice if the create service created an authorities section with nothing in it. Now, yes. However, that reminds me, Andrew, that when you go in and when you say, for example, workflow, let's go to the workflow service. If we create an instance, which we did, we've created an instance already, right? We've created an instance. If we specify new instance, which we did before, we'll choose the light plan here. Remember that? That makes sense now. I remember looking at it thinking, I don't even know what that means. Authorities, open, close brackets. Okay, so I'm going to leave that on the screen for a second because I'm not sure how laggy my MacBook is at the moment. But effectively, this is where you can predefine the authorities that you want that particular instance to have. Okay, now, what do we want to conclude from that? Just let me know when you can see that authorities open close brackets on the screen there. Because Can somebody say, yes, it does make sense. Yes, exactly. It sort of makes sense now. So I'm not going to create a new instance, but that makes sense. And so where were we? Where did we get to? We got to Workflow API. We got to the successful calling of that. Now, if I now update that again, and remove that workflow definition get from the authorities, so basically giving the workflow service instance no authorities again, which is what it was at the start. Okay, and I'll move that back down again. If I hit execute again, I'll just move that up. If I hit execute again, let's see what happens. We're back to user does not have sufficient privileges. Now, testing this out on the command line with access tokens and everything, we get a slightly different result, but I'll explain why, and it all makes sense later. But thank you, Andrew. Okay, the lag seems pronounced on the command line. Okay. Oh, God. Anyway. So what does this mean? This means that we have sort of started to scratch the surface of understanding relating to how OAuth is used from the workflow API perspective. So what's being used in the background for the API hub is the client credentials grant OAuth 2.0 flow. What we also can realize is once we start looking at how the flow works, what we can also realize is that every time we make a call here with execute, every time we try out a particular API call, it goes through the whole client credentials grant flow again. It doesn't try to reuse a token it's already got. And that's the reason why as soon as we set the authorities for the workflow service instance to empty, open close brackets, the next time we made a call in the API Business Hub, we successfully, quote unquote, we successfully got that does not have sufficient privileges error. So in the last 8 minutes, and we're just starting to dive into this OAuth thing now, I wanted to establish at least the baseline of a little bit of understanding. Let's have a look at how the client credentials grant works. Prerequisites. You've created a service instance with the necessary authorities to invoke the REST APIs that you want, okay? And if you look at the technical documentation or technical authentication link, you'll see how this, using update service to send some JSON. By the way, I know that Andrew was interested in this. Something that I was actually using is this YQ thing here. So what I can do, for example, is I can say CF update service workflow -C, and then YQ read. I think I've done this before, haven't I? From the command line. Okay, and then I can say authorities workflow definition get, and that's it. And that's all I need to do. And it's a lot easier to type. So I typed in some YAML in standard in on the command line. That got converted to Java to JSON, and then that was sent into the update service. Okay, so that means now I've just updated again. So that's exactly what we wanted to do here, which was to provide the necessary authority. Okay, you have bound the service instance to your Cloud Foundry application, or you have created a service key. We've created a service key. Okay, you have noted down the following parameters from the procedure term in service key configuration parameters: client ID, client secret, URL, workflow REST URL, or workflow OData URL. Now, I've got 5 minutes. I don't want to rush this, so I'm going to start with this on the command line. Thank you, Andrew. I think it's really, you know, the YQ thing is beautiful, right? Starting on the command line, and we'll go and start this flow. Now, yeah, let's see where we get and see if we can overrun a little bit. I know that Max allowed himself to overrun yesterday for a few minutes, so I think maybe I'll allow myself as well. So let's go to the command line again. Where are we? There we go. And now you have bound the service instance, you create a service key, you have noted down the following parameters from the procedure, client ID, da, 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 da. So why don't we use the command line to our advantage and start sort of embracing the service key information rather than cutting and pasting and everything, which seems a little bit sort of horrible. There we go there. So there, let's grab our service key. That's that thing there, right? Service key, workflow, simple workflow credentials. Okay, so to make it a little bit more convenient for us, let's put that into keys.json. Now, I mentioned before that I don't know why, but the design of the CF command line is just not nice, because it spits out all these sort of little headings and everything, which means that when you really want to get some proper output, you get some mess in it as well. So we've got to delete these two lines, and there's the output that we want. Okay, there's our JSON. So now we can use JQ just to have a look at that. In a lot nicer way. So we can see, for example, we've got all the things we've looked at. So there, for example, is our workflow REST URL. And in the UAA node of our JSON, we've got the client ID and the client secret. We've also got down here, haven't we, this authentication URL endpoint. So we've got everything we need now to start forming the first part of the client credentials grant flow, which basically involves us making a post request with grant type client credentials. That's what it says in the documentation. That's the thing I've said there. Yeah, maybe it is undocumented. I have a look. It's not documented, so yeah, maybe there's an undocumented one, but it's terrible. You know, I don't know why they've designed it like that. But anyway, what do I know? So we can say, for example, you know, with JQ, give me the UAA.client ID from the keys.json, and we've got that there, right? So we can sort of do something like, we can do something a little bit more interesting. We can maybe define a function, service key value, yeah, and define it as JQ, give me the raw version of whatever we specified in the first argument to this function we're going to call from keys.json. There we go. So now we can say service key value dot UAA dot client ID, and we get it. Okay, so that's convenient for us. So now let's have a quick look at what we need to do. It's 8:58. Let me know if you're okay with me carrying on for another 5 minutes maximum, because I think I want to maybe get through this flow, which we've done before. Remember, on the command line, we did it really without too much of an understanding, of a wider understanding of the context. But now we know what's happening behind the scenes in the workflow API, in the API Business Hub, and why we got the error, even though DJ had the right roles and everything. You know, we understand this a little bit better. Okay. Oh, I've got a warning now. The stream's current bit rate is lower than the recommended bit rate. Yes, I've had this before, only on macOS. So I'm going to. Okay. So what we need to do is we need to request an access token, like we've seen before, from the OAuth 2 server. Send a post request to the token endpoint URL appended with grant type equals client credentials. And we have to authenticate that call with the client ID and client secret. Remember, -u, let's make that a little bit bigger, -u in curly is basically send the user ID and password like this, okay? Yeah, where the URL is that, okay, fine. So let's do that. OAuth token, grant type client credentials. So let's do that. It's a post request, post, and also we've got, remember here, cat, oh no, vi SKV UAA client ID, and let's put that into my, because I need to update my netrc. I'll tell you what that is, and the client secret. There we go, login and password, login, password. So this is basically to cause me not to have to specify this client ID and client secret for that particular endpoint, which is our token endpoint with that subdomain there using netrc, which we've talked about netrc before. So now we'll say curl, use netrc to authenticate. Let's just be explicit and say post, okay, post request. And what we want is the URL. In fact, why don't we say, first of all, let's just do an echo so we can see what's going on. Echo, the result of SKV of the UAA.URL appended with OAuth token grant type equals client credentials. Okay, and that's it. So let's see what that gives us. Yeah, so that is the URL. Okay, the lag isn't command line related. I can hear the keystrokes and see the screen about 2 seconds later. Okay. Yeah, okay. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you. So what we've got here is the URL that we want to make a post request to. Okay, authenticating with the client ID and client secret. So that now let's replace that echo with curl, use netrc, let's use verbose as well, and let's say post. Let's see what happens. There we go, we get an access token. Okay, so let's actually capture that token.json in there. Okay, we still get 200 okay, and JQ token.json. There we go, there's our access token. And we've seen this before, right? We get an access token. It hasn't got a refresh token thing because it's a different flow, but anyway, let's deal with that later. So now what does it say? It now says, note down the access token and perform the call to the workflow service API by sending the access token as the header in the authorization header using the workflow REST URL or workflow OData URL. So now let's do that final thing. Okay, hopefully this is all starting to come together. So we've got our service key value of UAA it's endpoint dot workflow REST URL, isn't it? Yeah, there it is. That's the one. That's from our service key. So now what we've got to do is we've got to say curl minus minus header authorization bearer, and then the result of what's our thing here, JQ of raw access token from token.json. So we're sending the access token with the bearer keyword in the authorization header, and then we'll make that call to skv.endpoints.workflow REST URL, followed by v1, what's it called? Workflow definitions. I think that's it, right? And there we go. We get the same answer. Now, just to double check things, let's just paste that into pretty print type thing. There we go. Simple workflow order process. So we've now sort of hopefully joined up a little bit of knowledge from what we've done before, understood that what we did before is called the client credentials grant flow. And we've used that in the workflow API in the API Business Hub. And we've done it on the command line. We've joined everything together. And we know that in order to make calls using that client credentials grant flow, we need to make sure that the scopes are assigned to the workflow instance that we're getting our service key authentication from, like the client ID, the client secret, and so on. Anyway, that's it. I would definitely like to do to continue with this next time, because there's also, of course, the authorization code grant, which is a user djadams@sap.com based authentication grant, which uses the roles that's assigned to me rather than the scopes in the service key. Okay, let's do that next time. There we go. So I hope that was okay. By the way, for JSON output, it might be worth looking into CF curl. CF curl. Interesting. I will. Thank you, Max. Okay. I hope that was okay. Sorry about the lag. Sorry about the issues with the microphone at the start. But there we go. Have a lovely sunny rest of day wherever you are, and I shall see you on the other side. Bye for now.